I thought I'd learned my lesson the first time. I was smarter, more careful. I wouldn't fall for the same tricks again. But Gemma, she was different, or so I told myself. By the time I realized what was happening, I'd already lost another $240,000. This time, I don't even know who to be angry at anymore. Maybe just myself. I stood on the balcony of my rented apartment in Dumaguete, watching the sun bleed orange across the ocean. 74 years old, and I was starting over. Again. The heat wrapped around me like a damp towel, but I didn't mind. It was better than the cold silence of my house back in Perth. 3 years ago, I lost nearly everything to a woman in Manila, Rowena, 31 years old, beautiful, in that effortless way that made men stupid. She said all the right things, played the role perfectly. I believed every word. By the time I figured out she had a boyfriend, that I'd been funding both their lives for 18 months, I was down AUD $180,000 and my pride was shattered into pieces so small I couldn't even find them all. I went back to Perth after that, licked my wounds in my house in Willetton, told myself I was done with the Philippines, done with younger women, done with believing in second chances at my age. I was 74. For God's sake, what was I thinking? My daughter stopped calling around that time. She'd warned me about Rowena, said I was being foolish, said I was embarrassing myself. When I didn't listen, she cut me off. Can't say I blame her. My mates from the union were either dead or too sick to meet for a pint. I sat in that house, staring at the same four walls, watching the news, eating frozen dinners, wondering what the hell I was supposed to do with the rest of my life. The silence was crushing. That's the thing about loneliness. It doesn't just sit quietly in the corner. It talks to you, whispers, convinces you that maybe, just maybe, you deserve one more chance at happiness. So I came back to the Philippines, not to Manila this time, somewhere smaller, quieter. I rented a place near the boulevard in Dumaguete, modest, clean, close to the water. I told myself I wasn't looking for love, just peace. Just a place where my pension stretched further and the weather didn't hurt my knees. But I was lying to myself. I knew it even then. I met Gemma at a small cafe near Silliman University. I wasn't looking for anyone that day. I'd gone there to read the paper and drink bad coffee in peace. It was one of those lazy Saturday mornings where the heat hadn't quite kicked in yet, and the tourists were still sleeping off their hangovers. She was sitting 2 tables over, working on a laptop, her brow furrowed in concentration. 26, I'd later learn. Long dark hair pulled into a messy bun, no makeup. Wearing an old university shirt and flip-flops, she looked normal, not trying too hard, not dressed to impress foreign men. When our eyes met, she smiled, quick and polite, then went back to her screen. I liked that. No lingering, no flirting. Just a simple acknowledgement that we were both human beings, sharing the same space. Later, when I got up to leave, I accidentally knocked my phone off the table. It slipped from my fingers and I watched it fall in slow motion, already calculating the cost of a new screen. But she caught it before it hit the ground. Lightning fast. "Careful, sir," she said, handing it back. Her English was clear, unforced. Not the practiced English of bar girls or hotel workers. "Screens are expensive to fix here." I laughed. "Tell me about it." "Thanks for the save." "You're Australian?" she asked. "Perth?" I said. "How'd you know?" She grinned. "The accent. And you called it a mobile, not a phone. Dead giveaway." We talked for 20 minutes, just casual conversation. She told me she was a freelance graphic designer, working with a few local businesses and international clients. She'd grown up in a small barangay outside Dumaguete, helped pay for her younger brother's schooling. Her father had died when she was 18, heart attack. Her mother still lived in the province, trying to make ends meet with a small sari-sari store. "It's tough," she said, shrugging, "but we manage. I'm lucky I can work from anywhere with internet." She didn't ask me for anything, didn't flirt, didn't fish for compliments, or try to extend the conversation beyond its natural end. Before I left, she said, If you ever need help finding your way around Dumaguete, let me know. It's a small city, but it's easy to get lost if you don't know the roads. I'll keep that in mind, I said. I didn't think much of it at the time, just a friendly local being nice to an old foreigner. But 2 days later, I saw her again at the public market, carrying bags of vegetables and fruit, and this time, I was the one who said hello. "Hey, Gemma, right?" She turned, surprised. "Walter, yeah, hi. Shopping for dinner?" "Trying to," I said, still figuring out what half these vegetables are. She laughed. "Come on, I'll show you. You can't live here and not know your kangkong from your sitaw." Over the next month, Gemma and I spent more time together. It started innocently enough. Coffee, walks along the boulevard, dinners at small local restaurants she recommended, places where foreigners didn't usually go, where the food was cheap and authentic and the owners knew her by name. She never asked me to pay. In fact, she often insisted on splitting the bill. "I'm working," she'd say with a shrug. "I'm not a charity case." I respected that. God, I respected that. It made me feel like she wanted my company, not my wallet. After Rowena, that distinction mattered more than I can explain. One evening, she invited me to her small studio apartment near the university. "It's not fancy," she warned, "but if you want real Filipino coffee, the kind we actually drink, not the tourist stuff, come by around 7. I showed up with a box of pastries from the bakery near my place. She opened the door wearing shorts and an oversized t-shirt, her hair wet from the shower. The apartment was clean but cramped, one room, a single bed pushed against the wall. A desk cluttered with design projects, sketches, color swatches. Photos of her family were taped to the wall, her father in a barong, her mother smiling. A young man I assumed was her brother in a graduation gown. "It's not much," she said, a little embarrassed. "But it's mine. It's perfect," I told her. And I meant it. We talked for hours that night. She told me about losing her father, how it happened suddenly. One morning he was fine, eating breakfast, complaining about the heat. By afternoon, he was gone. She was 18. Her brother was 14. "I had to drop out of university for 2 years, she said quietly. Worked at a call center in Cebu. Night shift. Terrible hours. But the money was good enough to keep my brother in school. He's in his 3rd year now. Engineering." "That's incredible," I said. "That you did that for him," she shrugged. "Family. You do what you have to do." Then she told me about her mother, how her arthritis had gotten worse, how the medication she needed was expensive, and her mother refused to spend money on herself when there were other bills to pay. Gemma's voice cracked a little when she talked about it. "I send her what I can," she said. "But it's never enough. I feel like I'm always choosing between helping her and keeping myself afloat." I didn't offer money. Not yet. I just listened, nodded, told her she was doing more than most people would. Before I left, she hugged me, tight, genuine. "Thank you for not treating me like I'm just some poor girl from the province," she said quietly against my shoulder. "Everyone here thinks that's all I am." I didn't know what to say, so I just held her a little longer. That night, lying in bed, listening to the distant sound of karaoke from down the street, I realized I was falling for her. And this time, I told myself it would be different. She was different. We were building something real, slow, honest, no games, no manipulation, just 2 people who understood loneliness and found something unexpected in each other. I wanted to believe that so badly I ignored the voice in my head telling me I'd thought the exact same thing about Rowena. 3 months in, things started to shift. It was small at first, so small I almost didn't notice. Gemma mentioned her laptop was dying. Old, slow, constantly freezing during client calls. "I'm losing projects because of it," she said one evening over dinner. She didn't ask me to replace it, she just sighed and changed the subject. But the comment stuck with me. I thought about it for days. Finally, I decided to help. A week later, I bought her a new one. MacBook Pro, AUD $2,200. I told myself it was an investment in her business, in her future, our future. When I gave it to her, she cried. Actually cried. "Walter, you didn't have to do this," she said, trembling. "I would have figured something out." "I wanted to," I said, and I meant it. She threw her arms around me and kissed me. Thank you so much. You don't know what this means." But after that, the requests came more often. Not directly. Never directly. She'd mention things in passing. Her brother's tuition was due. "Carlo's stressing about the deadline," she'd say. "I'm trying to scrape together the money, but this month has been slow for work." Her mother needed a new water pump for the house. The old one finally gave out. Now she's hauling water from the neighbors. At her age, Walter. It breaks my heart. The landlord raised her rent. "I don't know how I'm going to cover it and still send money home," she'd say, staring at her phone with this tired, defeated look. I paid. Every time. Sometimes it was 10,000 pesos. Sometimes 30,000. Once it was 50,000 for Carlo's tuition. She never demanded. She never manipulated. She just shared her struggles. And I wanted to help. I wanted to be the man who could make her life easier, who could fix things. But then I noticed other things. She started being less available. She'd cancel plans last minute. "Family emergency," she'd text. Or, "Client deadline, I'm so sorry." Or, "Not feeling well, can we reschedule?" When we did meet, she seemed distracted, checking her phone constantly, texting someone. She'd laugh at something on her screen, and when I'd ask what was funny, she'd say, "Oh, just my friend being stupid." One night, I couldn't take it anymore. "Is everything okay?" I asked. She looked at me, startled. "Of course. Why? You just seem distant lately, like your mind's somewhere else." Her face softened. She reached for my hand across the table. "I'm sorry, Walter. I've just been stressed. Work's been crazy. Family stuff. You know how it is. I don't mean to pull away. You'd tell me if something was wrong, right?" I said. "Of course," she said, squeezing my hand. "I promise. Everything's fine." I believed her. I wanted to believe her so badly. But late at night, lying in bed, I'd replay conversations in my head. The way she'd avoid certain questions. The way she'd change the subject when I asked about visiting her family in the province. The way she'd gotten vague about her schedule. I told myself I was being paranoid, that I was projecting my experience with Rowena onto Gemma, that not every woman was a liar, but the doubt had planted itself, and it was growing. Gemma came to me one evening with an opportunity. We were sitting on my balcony, watching the sunset, drinking San Miguel Light. She'd been quiet all evening. Finally, she spoke. "Walter, can I talk to you about something?" "Of course," I said. "Anything." She took a deep breath. "My cousin owns a small resort in Siquijor. You know the island?" "I've heard of it," I said. "White sand beaches, waterfalls, that sort of thing." "Yeah, it's beautiful, really beautiful. But his resort is struggling. He's had some bad luck, equipment breaking, slow tourism season, the bank's threatening to foreclose." "That's rough," I said. "He asked me if I knew anyone who might want to invest," she said carefully. "If we could get some renovations done, update the marketing, it could be really profitable. Tourism is booming again post-pandemic. Foreigners love Siquijor." I said. She blushed. I know I can't contribute much, but I thought maybe we could be partners. I'd manage the marketing, handle the local side, deal with the staff and suppliers. You'd help with the capital. We'd split the profits." She pulled out her phone and showed me photos. The place was run down but had potential. Beachfront, 6 cottages, a small restaurant, good bones. "How much would he need?" I asked. "He needs 8 million pesos to clear the debt and start repairs." maybe another 2 million for marketing and furnishings. But we could start with 8 and see how it goes. I did the math. AUD $210,000. It was a lot, most of what I had left after Rowena. My pension covered my living expenses here, but this would wipe out my savings. But Gemma looked at me with such hope, such vulnerability. This could be our future, Walter. Something we build together, something that lasts. Our future. Those 2 words hit me harder than anything else she could have said. I wanted a future. I wanted something to look forward to. I wanted to believe that at 74, I could still build something meaningful. Let me think about it, I said, but I'd already decided. 3 days later, I wired 8 million pesos to the account Gemma gave me. Her cousin's account, she said. She kissed me when I told her, tears in her eyes. You won't regret this, Walter. I promise. This is going to change everything for us. For the first month, she sent me updates, photos of workers on the property, renovation plans, excited messages about potential bookings. I felt proud, like I was finally building something real, something that would outlast me. But then the updates slowed. First they came every few days, then weekly, then not at all. When I asked, she'd say, my cousin's handling everything. I'm so busy with client work I haven't had time to check in, but everything's fine. Don't worry. Can we visit? I asked. I'd love to see the progress. Not yet, she said. There's construction delays. The rooms aren't ready. It's not safe for visitors right now. When then? Soon, she'd say. Soon. But soon never came. Then one day, I couldn't reach her. I called. Voicemail. I texted. No response. I went to her apartment. I knocked for 10 minutes. No answer. I asked the landlord, an older woman who ran a small store on the ground floor. Oh, Gemma, she said. She moved out 2 weeks ago. My heart dropped. Moved out? Where? She didn't say. Paid what she owed and left. No forwarding address. I felt sick, actually sick. My hands started shaking. I walked back to my apartment in a daze. 2 weeks. She'd been gone for 2 weeks and hadn't told me. I tried calling again. Still nothing. I spent the next 3 days in my apartment, barely eating, calling her number over and over. Finally, I did what I should have done months ago. I hired a local investigator, discreetly, through a contact I'd made on an expat forum. I gave him Gemma's name, her photos, everything I knew. 5 days later, he called me. Mr. Walter, I found her. Where? I said, gripping the phone so hard my knuckles went white. She's in Cebu, he said, living in a condo in Lahug. Nice place. Expensive. Alone? I asked, though I already knew the answer. No. She's with a man. Australian. Name's Jake. Mid-30s. Works in mining. They've been together for about 8 months, according to neighbors. 8 months. We'd been together for 5. The timeline hit me like a punch to the stomach. And the resort? I asked. There was a pause. Mr. Walter, there is no resort. At least not one owned by her cousin. I checked the property she showed you in the photos. It exists, but it's owned by a Chinese investor who's had it on the market for 2 years. The photos she sent you were from the real estate listing. The account you wired money to was a shell account. The money's gone. I couldn't speak. I couldn't breathe. I'm sending you some photos, he said. I'm sorry. The photos came through a minute later. Gemma and Jake on a beach. At a fancy restaurant. Her in a new dress, smiling, holding his hand. Her with expensive shopping bags. Her in front of a car I knew she couldn't afford. I stared at the photos until my eyes burned, until the images blurred and I couldn't tell if it was the screen or tears. I'd done it again. After everything I'd learned, after all the warnings I'd given myself, I'd fallen for the exact same con. Different woman, different story, same ending. And this time, I couldn't even blame ignorance. I knew better, and I did it anyway. I sent her one message, just one. I know about Jake. I know about the money. I know everything. I stared at my phone for an hour, watching the message sit there unread. Then, finally, the 2 check marks turned blue. She'd seen it. I waited. 30 minutes later, she responded, "I'm sorry, Walter. I never meant to hurt you. I just needed a way out. You were kind, but I couldn't stay. I hope you understand." That was it. No remorse, no explanation, just "I hope you understand." I read the message 10 times, 20 times, trying to find something in those words that made sense, some hint of the woman I thought I knew, but there was nothing, just cold, efficient distance. I wanted to rage, to scream, to demand answers, to ask her how she could do this, how she could look me in the eye, hug me, kiss me, cry in my arms, and lie the entire time. But what was the point? She'd already told me everything I needed to know. I was a way out, a means to an end, nothing more. I blocked her number, deleted every photo I had of her, tried to forget what her voice sounded like. But I couldn't delete the shame, couldn't delete the fact that I'd lost another $240,000, that I'd believed every word she said, even when the red flags were right in front of me, that at 74 years old, I was still stupid enough to think a 26-year-old woman could love me for anything other than my money. The worst part wasn't the money. It was the realization that I'd convinced myself this time was different, that I'd learned, that I'd grown. But I hadn't learned anything. I'd just found new ways to lie to myself. I'm still in Dumaguete. I can't afford to go back to Perth now. My savings are gone. My pension covers my rent and food and not much else. I live simply, quietly. I walk to the market in the mornings. I drink coffee at the same cafe where I met Gemma, though I sit at a different table now. I watch the ocean. I read. I exist. I see women like her sometimes. At the cafes. At the market. Young, beautiful. Smiling at older foreign men, laughing at their jokes, touching their arms, playing the part. I wonder how many of them are real. How many actually care about the men they're with. How many are just surviving the only way they know how. I don't blame Gemma anymore. Not really. She saw an opportunity. I was lonely, desperate, naive. I made it easy. She probably told herself she deserved the money, that I could afford to lose it, that men like me come here expecting to buy love anyway, so what did it matter if she took what was offered? Maybe she's right. Maybe I was always going to lose that money one way or another, but I blame myself for falling twice, for ignoring every red flag, for refusing to see what was right in front of me because I wanted so badly to believe I was still worth loving, for thinking that companionship could be bought if you just found the right person, told yourself the right story. I'm 74 years old. I've lost over AUD $400,000 to 2 women who never loved me. And the worst part? The part that keeps me up at night? I'd probably do it again if someone looked at me the right way. If someone smiled and laughed at my jokes and made me feel like I wasn't just a broken old man waiting to die alone. Because loneliness doesn't care how much you've learned. It doesn't care about your past mistakes or your promises to yourself. It just keeps whispering that maybe this time will be different, that maybe you deserve one more chance, that maybe, just maybe, you're still worth something to someone. I know better now. I know that love at my age, especially here, is a transaction. That youth and beauty and affection all have a price. That the women who seek out men like me aren't looking for love. They're looking for survival, escape, a better life. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's honest in its way. But I'm too old for honest. I'm too old for transactional. I'm too old to play the game anymore. So I sit on my balcony and watch the sun set over the ocean and tell myself I'm at peace. That I've accepted my situation. That I'm okay being alone. But I'm not. I'm really not. And I probably never will be. That's the truth of it. The truth I can finally admit. Not that I was scammed. Not that I was used. But that I knew. Somewhere deep down, I knew the whole time. And I let it happen anyway, because being lied to was better than being alone, because temporary affection, even fake affection, was better than sitting in silence. Because at 74, I'm not looking for truth anymore. I'm just looking for someone to tell me pretty lies until I die. And that's the most pathetic realization of all.